Bang! Neeves Knives, I'm Jared, and today I'm going to show you guys how to properly sharpen a knife very fast. So what is the proper way to sharpen a knife? Well, it's with stones. Regardless if you are using natural stones or synthetic stones or diamond stones. I usually recommend diamonds because they cut very fast and they work on any steel. Now, synthetic stones and a lot of natural stones won't work on every steel, especially the high performance steels, but diamonds will. And like I said, they do cut extremely fast. So what is the trick to sharpening a knife extremely fast? Well, the key is it's all about your angle. So in a lot of cases, if you want like a high performance cutting edge, you're going to want a little bit of a lower angle. The higher the angle, the tougher the edge, but also the faster you'll be able to sharpen. Now, admittedly, if the knife is thick as a brick and it's a super hard use thick edge, then it's going to take a while no matter what. It's just the nature of the beast. The thicker it is, the longer it takes. But as far as thin geometry knives, which a lot of knives are, you don't have to spend 45 minutes to an hour sharpening. Now you can if that's the type of angle you want. If you want one of those hair whittling, high performance, high level sharpness edges, but that doesn't mean it's always superior. Now, a high angle edge will still shave hair, it'll still cut cleanly through paper, and it'll still be extremely sharp. Now, it will wear down a little bit faster, but it will hold a lot of toughness, so it can handle impact and things like that. So, if you're in your kitchen and you have your knife and you just want to get it sharp pretty quick, we'll talk about folding knives also here in a minute, but right now we're going to talk about chef knives. If you just want to get it nice and sharp really fast, here is the trick. So first off, you want to take your knife. I'm going to use the big knife to explain this. Hold it 90 degrees straight up and down. So you have the knife on the stone with the edge touching the stone. Now, if you cut the measurement in half from the spine to the stone, so there's the stone, there's 90 degrees, cut that in half, that's 45 degrees. If I cut that in half again, that's 22.5 degrees. Now, anywhere between 22.5 degrees and 45 degrees is where we want it, right around 30 degrees. Now, 22.5 degrees is actually a good edge angle. It's a nice tough edge. It's still very sharp. It's actually what a lot of factory edges are. They're 22.5 degrees. So, being at a 30 degree edge angle, yes, it's going to be a little bit higher, but because it's higher, you won't have to remove as much steel. So it will go a lot faster. Instead of spending an hour on the stone, you'll be able to spend 10 minutes, 10 minutes or so. So basically, in summary, this is a high angle. This is a lower angle. So when I say low angle, I'm saying the spine is closer to the stone when sharpening. A high angle, the spine will be farther away from the stone when sharpening, making it so that you're removing less metal, less steel, and that edge will be a lot tougher. It won't be as sharp as a low angle edge, but it will be a lot tougher, and it still will be sharp, and it will go a lot faster in order to sharpen it. Now, I do recommend using a stone between 100 and 300 grit. Now, if the knife is very thin, you could probably get by with a 400 grit, but between 100 and 300 grit is going to be the best coarse stones for sharpening. Now, when you see people using 1,000 or starting with 1,000 grit stone, in most cases, they are just doing edge maintenance or honing, because you don't sharpen on 1,000 grit stone. That's a finishing stone. Not saying you have to finish at 1,000, you could finish at 6,000, but 1,000 grit is still a finishing stone. So the sharpening stone is going to be the first stone, the reprofiling stone, the stone that gets rid of all the nicks and chips and damage and creates a new apex. The new apex from the first stone is your sharp edge. Every stone after that just refines the teeth. So with the first stone, it's going to have the biggest teeth. Think a saw blade. Think about a saw blade. So you have the saw teeth. Now, as you move up in stones, you're making the teeth smaller and smaller and closer together, making it a finer edge. But it still has the same angle and the same level of sharpness. The teeth are just getting smaller. Now, and you can also somewhat stretch out the apex just a little bit and make it a little bit keener. So there are going to be times where, you know, as you go up, you might feel like it's getting a little bit sharper. But all in all, your first stone is the most important. Now, you should be able to do this with only 2 stones. If you have 3, that's just fine too, but you should have no problem getting a great edge with 2 stones. In fact, if you really had to, you could do it with 1 stone. You could do it with 1 stone and a strap, but we're gonna use 2 today. Now, you can find everything I'm using from this video down in the description, either in the HAPSTONE link or in the Neeves Knives store link. So if you want to know the strops, the stones, all that stuff, it's all down in the description. I recommend Atoma stones the most for diamond plates. They are quite expensive. If you're on a budget, go with Ultra Sharp. We have a 140 grit Atoma here we're going to start off with. And like I said, I'm going to do a high angle. So I have it at 90 degrees. There's 45. I'm going to go just a little bit lower than that. And then once you get that angle right, the trick is to lock your wrist. So I'm gonna grip the knife, right? I'm gonna grip the knife. This is my comfortable grip right here for me to sharpen. Now, when I put it on the stone, I'm going to focus on locking my wrist. My wrist is locked right now. So in order to get it across the stone, I am not going to move my wrist because I want my angle to be locked. There's 2 different angles here. There's this angle, which is to get the entire blade shape. And then there's this angle, which is the edge angle. That's the one we don't want to move. Once we have it locked in place, we need it to stay there. As we come across the stone, we do not want to move this like this. We want it to go across the stone at the same angle, and when we want to get to the tip, we just lift our elbow. That way we're not fluctuating the angle, we're only fluctuating the blade shape. Now, this is a very dull knife. It will not even cut paper. It's super dull. I've already cut off the edge, but just to show you again, we'll cut off the edge and lock my wrist. I got my angle. That's the angle I want. It's a nice high angle, which is going to be a tough edge. And let's get to work. Also, when you put it on the stone, do at least 20 passes. I say 20 to 40 passes every time. When you lift it up and you put it back down, do another 20 passes. Because if you're not used to holding an angle, what's gonna happen is when you set it back down, you're gonna be slightly different. The angles are just very slightly different. Even though you feel like it's the exact same, it's gonna be slightly different. And that way, through 20 passes, you can make sure the entire bevel is hit with that same angle. So my wrist, I'm very natural at holding and locking my wrist so that when I go back, I'm right back at the same angle that I started at. So if I do stop like this, my wrist is still locked in the same position. That does take some getting used to, but you absolutely can do that. And we have a burr all the way up and down. So I'm going to just do a little bit of a stropping pass. All I'm doing is knocking the burr back. You don't have to do that. I like to do that. And now I'm going to do the other side. So I've already created a burr. The burr is letting me know that my scratch pattern has reached my apex, which is basically our sign that we have finished our edge bevel on that side. Now, if you're holding too high of an angle, then it's just basically creating a little micro bevel. So, and in that case, you're not finished with sharpening. So a burr is not necessarily a perfect indicator saying you're finished with the edge bevel. It's gonna be your scratch pattern. You can see the scratch pattern starting from the top of the bevel, working its way down to the apex. Right now, we mostly have a burr all the way across. I'm gonna do some more passes just to reassure that we hit everything. And I can see the scratch pattern on the bevel going from the top of the bevel to the apex, from the heel of the blade to the tip. So let's take a look at it. Beautiful scratch pattern, looks great. I do have one little microchip still right here. Now, I could leave that, you know, to make it go faster, because that little chip isn't gonna stop my edge from being super sharp and cutting things. Or I could work on it and finish getting that little tiny microchip out. It's not very big, but in order to save us a little bit of time, I've got rid of most of the other microchips. I have just one little one left. I'm gonna leave it and I'll get it on the next sharpening. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna switch stones now, and I'm gonna go to 300 grit. So 300 grit, I said this is a stone you should start on. So this is a very coarse edge. I would recommend, you know, if you started with a 300, use a 600 for your second stone. I started with a 140, so my second stone was a 300. I could jump to 600, but right now, I'm trying to get a nice sharp edge as fast as possible. Remember, try to do 20 passes to reassure that your angle is the same from heel to tip, from the top of the bevel to the apex. That looks great. It feels great. All right, let's get to the next side. Knock that burr off. You'll know you have a burr because you can feel it. It's a wire that accumulates on the edge. I've spoke about it a lot. If you don't understand the burr, there's lots of videos on it, and I've talked about it a lot in lots of sharpening videos. I have an entire playlist teaching knife sharpening. So if you really want to learn a lot more about knife sharpening, check out my knife sharpening playlist. Oh yeah, it's feeling really good. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do I'm going to diminish my burr a little bit. My burr's kind of big, so if it was small, I wouldn't do this, but because it's big, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a reverse pass. I'm going to work on this side a little bit and then flip back over. Because my apex is made, or sorry, my edge bevel is made right now. I do have an edge bevel, but I have accumulated steel at the apex, which is the burr. I gotta remove that to reveal a perfect apex, because that metal is running across the edge, right? Creating a wire. And it's a bunch of gathered up steel that I've shaved off that's still hanging on. I gotta remove that in order to reveal a nice clean cutting apex. But I don't want to remove it with it being really, really big. I want it to be a little bit smaller so that when I tear it off, it doesn't take steel with it. I'm doing light passes now, hardly any pressure. When I first started, I did have a little bit of pressure because I'm trying to go a little bit fast, but you really don't want to do pressure. The diamonds will cut very fast, so you don't need pressure. So use very light pressure, just basically the weight of your arm, the weight of the blade, maybe a little tiny bit more pressure than that, but nothing to where you're like, you're trying to like, it's not like you're sanding a table, you know? You're letting the diamonds do the work, or whatever the abrasiveness you are using, whatever stone you're using. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a stropping pass, and all I'm doing is, in this case, I'm not too focused on the angle. All I'm trying to do is make sure the burr snags the stone and basically flips over to this side. So the burr is sitting like this on this side of the edge. So I want my stone to come up and hit the burr and tear it up like that, or flip it over that way. Very gentle. There's absolutely no pressure when you're doing burr removal. That is one of the best advices I can give you with burr removal. Zero pressure. You can literally use 2 fingers because it doesn't take anything. The stone is very, very hard. It already has everything it needs to remove that burr. It does not need pressure to do it. And when you use pressure, all you're going to do is encourage that you change the scratch pattern on your edge. Okay, now we need to strop. With stropping, make sure you're doing your best to hold the same angle you were using when sharpening. You don't want to go with a higher angle or a lower angle. You want very light pressure, very, very light pressure, because you don't want to indent the leather. You want the abrasive that's on the leather to do the work. So you coat your leather with an abrasive. I have everything linked down in the description. And then you let that abrasive slide past and over the edge, removing any micro steel that's still attached to the edge that you want removed, while also refining your teeth. The saw teeth that's on your edge, the stropping compound, the abrasive, is going to clean that up and help refine it just a little bit. But it does not require pressure, and you want to do it at the same angle you sharpened at. Now, if you're not 100% sure on the angle with stropping, go lower instead of higher, because a higher angle will roll your apex. A lower angle will only polish the back of the bevel. And then, you know, you can adjust from there. If you feel it not really working, you know, you can maybe raise it just slightly from there. And, you know, I could take my time and go nice and slow, but I'm trying to show you guys that you can do this really fast. It does take a little bit of practice, but if you just lock your wrist, use your elbow to do the movements, you know, maybe a little bit of body motion, but you don't move your wrist, you'd be surprised how fast, you can get a sharp edge. It feels pretty good. This is a 300 grit. So a 300 grit edge is a very coarse edge. Normally I would not stop at 300, I would stop at like 600, especially for this kind of steel. But as you can see, it is very sharp. And it absolutely would not cut paper before. I do still have that little tiny, tiny micro chip up here in the tip, and you'll see it when it hits it. Right there. So it's not going to stop me from doing any work I need to do in the kitchen, but it is there and it will affect paper. You know, I can feel it catching right there. So not a big deal. Like I said, you know, I could have spent a little bit more time cutting off my edge. I could have spent a little bit more time on the first stone. But for an edge that had a lot of microchips and a lot of damage, going from that to razor sharp in just a matter of minutes, you know, you can see. And like I said, you know, it's, even though it's a high angle, it's still a very sharp edge because of the thin geometry. That was only a few minutes. Now I could go to a 600 and clean it up even more, because the 600 will be finer, the burr will be easier to remove, it'll come off cleaner. There's lots of reasons why, you know, a medium grit is going to be the beginning of the finishing stones. So as a finishing stone, in my opinion, 500 grit up to 10,000 grit is a good finishing stone, just depending on the steel, depending on what you're wanting to do, depending on the type of edge you're gonna want. But I personally recommend usually stopping at 600 grit at the lowest, because that's going to be a high level of sharpness, a high level of bite with enough fineness that it's going to be easy to remove the burr and everything should go really nicely. With folding knives, folding knives, you might not want to do this as much. Now, can you? Yes, especially if it's thin behind the edge, you can absolutely do this. But if it's thick behind the edge, you do need a proper edge angle for certain knives, for certain tasks, especially if you want your edge to last a long time. So yes, you can put a high angle edge on anything and it will go faster, but it might not be the optimal edge for the job. Yes, it'll be sharp, but you know, the higher the angle, the tougher the edge is going to be, but also the faster it's probably going to go dull. The lower the angle, the more brittle it will be, but the sharper it will be, and the longer it will stay sharp, aside from impact and, you know, like I said, toughness, because the toughness goes down. So there's a balance. You want that happy medium. You want that place, that angle that's perfect for your geometry, your use, and the steel you're using. That's usually, in most cases, between 15 and 22 degrees. Now, for a tough edge, you can go up to 25 or 30 degrees for like a super tough edge, which is basically what we did here. We used a 30-degree edge bevel in order to go fast, to get us a nice sharp edge so we can finish the job, and later on, if we want to lower the angle down, we can, or we can continue having a tough edge, because this tough edge is going to be great for impact now. So a lot of chef knives, you know, you'll see a lot of chefs lower their angle down to like 14 degrees per side for the high levels of sharpness, but they also have some knives in their arsenal that have high angles because they're doing a lot of impact. They might be hitting bones and things like that, and they don't want their edges chipping, right? Chipping or rolling. So, you know, you do have to find that balance, but having a 30-degree edge bevel on a chef knife or on these types of knives, because they're thinner geometry, it works actually just fine. So practice it. Try it out, see what you think, let me know how it goes. Work hard, stay tough. Until next time, peace.